Well, hello traders and investors. I'm LA Little and this is your weekly NeoTA Wrap. We take a look at these markets, doing it from a neoclassical perspective, each time asking ourselves what happened this last week and what does it tell us about the coming ones. I do show every Sunday evening broadcast at or before 10 o'clock Eastern Time, archived on YouTube. It's under the channel LA Little. If you want to subscribe, just reach up in the right hand corner and do so, and anytime content's pushed, you'll get a notification. As far as last week, it was more of the same. On Friday here, you can see the markets really kind of digesting the gains. The Russell was the big winner last week, also pushed up on Friday, but for the most part, pretty much a sideways, couldn't go anywhere day. Gold was up, bounced back after a big spill the day before. And we saw elsewhere overseas, the same sort of action. So really not much on Friday. If we look at the weekly numbers, there we can see the big spike up, 3% on the Russell, 1.5%, 2% basically on the rest of the indexes. So let's pull these charts back. Let's take a look at the S&P 500. We'll start with it on a daily chart. And, we just saw more hang, right? You had the big bump up on the 13th, got over the swing point high, and since then it's just been hanging there. Now I want to call your attention to this chart here on the weekly. And the reason for that is on the weekly chart, what you actually have is you have a test failure. So you have the swing point high, gets up to it, right? Gets over it, closes back underneath it, just barely, but underneath it. If you look at the volumes on it, had more volume. That says it can come test it again, but it was a failure on the weekly time frame. And after this straight up push now, uninterrupted on the upside, right? One has to wonder, is this thing finally going to try to roll back over? So that's the S&P. That's the way that one looks. Let's take a look at the rest of the indexes. In particular, let's take a look at the Russell, since the Russell had the biggest move up. Now, the Russell benefited greatly, and that's what this spike up was, from the results in the financial arena in terms of the earnings. Now, it wasn't that they were great. Matter of fact, they were pretty bad, but they weren't as bad as they expected. They got a bump up. You broke swing point highs, and you're trying to extend. If you look at it on the weekly, Russell's coming after the highs of the breakdown bar. Not that far from them, another 3-4 points. It looks to me like just like the S&P probably will try to test again. This also looks like it's going to try to test higher. NASDAQ index has been the weakest. Take a quick peek at those. You see the same sort of thing, bump up, a little fade back down, 2 dojis in a row on the weekly at the breakdown bars, breakdown area. If we move over to the overseas markets and take a look at those, what you're going to see is the same sort of action, just much weaker, starting from a weaker base, but doing the same sort of thing on the upside. Let's start with Europe, the DAX. DAX pushing up towards the swing point high, getting pretty close. It's been benefiting from a slightly weaker euro the past few days. This last week, that's what got the big bump up. It doesn't look as if that's going to continue. You've got Draghi this week. If in fact that doesn't continue, you're going to see this market turn around and head right back the other way. France, same sort of picture, moving back up, going up into the Draghi bar, trying to get to the swing point high of that, or actually the highs of that Draghi bar. If we look over at Switzerland had a nice week finally, got a nice big push up and moving up towards the swing point high. So as we move back up, you're breaking some swing points on the way, getting qualified trend to the upside. But for the most part, all of these, if you look at them on the weekly, are much lower levels, and they're just simply trying to come back to some retest, regenerate areas on the downside. Let's move over and look at some of Asia, starting with a weekly chart here on the Shanghai. You can see how it's had a nice big spike, well, not so much a spike, but a grind higher. It's coming into a swing point low, just got into it. I believe these are going to be the big test here as they come back into these areas. And so, on Asian markets, you have the swing point lows that were previously beat, pushed to the downside, right? You've seen that. Now you're coming back up into those areas, and those areas are going to be the key test all the way back up. Just like the euro benefited from the weaker euro, the yen being weaker last week gave a nice big benefit to the Nikkei. And you can see here the Nikkei gets a nice big push up. If you look at it on a weekly basis, you can see that it pushes back up towards the high of the low that it was testing into. I think that the Nikkei is going to find trouble in this area, just like the euro and the European markets are going to try to find problems in the areas that they're coming into. So this swing point low right here, this swing point low from previously, those areas are going to be the tough spot on the way back up. So world markets coming back into resistance. Didn't look at Hong Kong. Let's pop Hong Kong up and get it up and look at it as well. Here's the nice big spike up, a little bit of a fade, but you look at it here, it's into the swing point high, and again, that's the retest regen area bearishly, 21,530. You pop up to that top area, 21,316. It got as high as 511, 530 was the number we just quoted. So the question is, does this thing turn around here on this test? Does it turn around and try to regenerate to the downside? I was talking about the weaker euro benefiting the European markets. You can see that here, right? You had this consolidation above these swing point highs, and then after that, right after it got over these areas, it just stagnated and eventually breaks back down and consolidates a little bit lower, and that allowed the European markets to march north. Can it pull back a little bit farther? Yeah, I can pull back into these two big high volume wide price spread bars, but that's probably about as far as it's going to go. And again, you've got the ECB on Thursday. I expect that there's no way they're going to be able to push this euro lower at this particular point in time. I mean, I can't imagine they're going to push out more QE yet. They just did it in gunslinging fashion last month. So if that's the case, then you're going to see this euro try to drift back up to the highs and break higher. And if it does, it's going to go after those swing point highs up above, and eventually, right, be testing these swing point highs here and trying to get up into what would be a bearish retest regen. And when we look at the Nikkei, you're going to, not the Nikkei, but the yen, you're going to see the same sort of thing happening. And so the key areas here, as you come back, right, first is the swing point high, but after that, then it's the breakdown bar, right, which is here. That's the breakdown bar. That's around 118, 119. That area there is going to be tough. That's 6-7 points up from here. That would be a fairly, significant move, 3.5% on the small side of it. And if that in fact happens, you're going to see the European markets really struggle in terms of holding price. Yen, exact same story. You see the breakout, even it's stronger here. Nice big strong move up on the weekly, and here it is coming back to do that bearish retest regen. When it gets to this area, I expect you're going to see some sort of intervention start to take place, and that's in this 92 to 97 area, and we're not all that far away. And when price was trading down here, I'm sure most of the big hedge funds were still shorting this thing, waiting on another consolidation and then a leg lower. But that's not the way it turned out. Instead, you get the big bounce instead of the consolidation leg lower. And so as it comes back up, that's going to be way after 6 bars. Odds are pretty high they're going to sell it there. It's not going to be a bad trade if you want to take the short side of that market. Until then, it's going to put pressure on the Nikkei. When it gets there and they start intervening, as I expect, that would probably put the juice back into that equity market, assuming that the markets still believe the central bankers can push things around. Big thing this morning, or actually tomorrow morning, is going to be the oil market. Oil market had a pretty good push up, came into the Doha meeting. They were expecting good things. They didn't get them. I see it was down about 5-6% on the futures off of that disappointment. If this oil market starts to crack, we're going to see some pressure on equities as a result. Here's that push up, gets towards the swing point high, can't get over it, and got back up to those same highs last week here, you can see. And as a result, now that it's coming back down, watch for it to come back into this area here. And if that gives up, folks, then people are going to get worried, right? So the key spot, these 2 bars here, so the key spot's going to be right about there. If you get down into this lower half of this range, that's going to be an area where I think you're going to see some of the worries come back in this market that have been missing here lately. And so that key price point, if we look at it here, looks like about 932 on the USO on a closing basis. On the WTI, it was around 35. And so that's the way that one looks, and I believe this is the one to watch to start the week. Of course, got earnings this week as well. That really helped the market last week, and it continue. I don't expect it to. We're going to get a little wider spread set of numbers this week, and when we do that, we're probably going to see a lot more weakness find its way back into these markets. As a result, I expect a lot of choppiness this week, up and down. If anything, some sort of consolidation, probably at best. I'm going to leave it at that. And if you want information, in a greater form, in depth, with picks and with a lot of knowledge transfer from me to you, you got to come check us out here on TA Today. Hit the Get Started button, see what we're all about. Have a great one. Take care and good night.